Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I'd love it if you left a comment as well. If you've watched my channel before, you've seen that I like to visit different art periods, and so looking at antique earrings online, I come across some that are obviously old-fashioned, but I can't necessarily always put them into an art period. The ones I'm going to do today are a slight modification. The antique ones I saw online didn't have any stones in them, but I'm going to add some trillion amethysts to them. And like I said, they kind of look Art Deco and they kind of look a little Art Nouveau. So I'm not sure which period I'd call these, but I guess we'll have to make a decision when we name the video. But let's do those today, and we'll make some pretty little earrings. So before we get started, I should thank some people. I have a new patron named Margareta. Thank you for signing up, Margareta. I hope you find the people over there to be as nice as I have found them. It's a really nice community that they've developed, and I really appreciate all of the support. Thanks for that, patrons. The other group is my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 12,000, which is awesome. I couldn't possibly have imagined that that would happen when I started the channel, so thank you for that. I appreciate all of the kind comments that you leave in the comment section. Some of those are really moving, and it makes me feel like I'm doing something good here, so thanks for that. I also appreciate the contributions, like the Buy Me a Coffee and the Super Thanks. With the rising cost of metals, it's really helpful when you do that kind of stuff, so thanks for that. I appreciate it. All right, well, let's get started on these earrings. This is one of my design idea books. You can get them on my merch store. There's even a new one that has a conversion table on it that converts between fractions of an inch to decimal places in inches to millimeters. So it's kind of handy if you need to switch back and forth between those. I find it useful to sketch up my ideas in advance so that I have a kind of a plan going into my projects. This is what I'm going to do today. I picked out a couple of trillion amethysts here. I didn't measure these. I think they're probably about a 7, a 6 or a 7. Let's see. I'd call it a 6. No, 7s. Those are 7 millimeters, and they're pretty little amethysts. So I'm going to hang those right here from kind of an ornate design like this. Like I said, the original antique piece I saw online just had an opening there. I'm going to put a little silver ball right here and fill up the rest of the opening with that. But this is very Art Deco-y looking to me, or maybe the curves on this part make it look a little Art Nouveau to me. So I don't know, probably Art Deco, but you tell me what you think. So I'm going to use pretty fine wire. Somebody suggested recently that I use a lot of thick wire for earrings that make them a little bit heavy. So let's do one that's relatively light, and we'll see how it turns out. I took some 18 gauge round wire, which this is another request I had recently, is millimeters instead of gauges. So 18 gauge round is 1.02 millimeters, and that's what we'll be using for most of this. I flattened some in the rolling mill to give it a little bit wider profile from the front, and we use the flat side up. So I think that'll give it a kind of a nice look. The 20 gauge I'll use for the ear wire is 0.81 millimeters. And all of the rest of this will be 18 gauge, I think. So the bezel I'm going to use 3/16 inch, which is 4.76 millimeters, and it's fine silver bezel strip. I'm using 28 gauge, which is pretty thin, and I'll create a step bezel for these using some of that 18 gauge round. So, all right. So to start with, let's make a bezel for one of these, and then I'll make the other one. Actually, I already made the other one, just because I'm not going to make you watch me do things twice. And when you're making a bezel for something that has these kind of points on it, we're not going to end where the solder joint is going to be on one of those points, because it's going to be really hard to get it to be symmetrical on all sides then. So I'm going to just kind of hand shape part of this to get it started with one angle on it. try and kind of put this like that. I'm going to make a mark right there where I think the corner should be. For the second corner. And then we'll just kind of like make a sharp bend there. Try and curve this one down. Then we can check where we're at as far as size and angles. So that's too big. I need to move the bend a little bit closer to the other one. You can do that if you offset your pliers just a little bit right over the angle with the so that when you pinch it, it forces that bend a little bit to one side. That looks reasonably tight around there. So let me find a T-pin, and I'm going to make a little scratch slightly beyond where they meet. And then we can use that as a guide to where to cut this. Just go ahead and solder these together. If you've never been to my channel before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder. I use a liquid flux. This particular stuff is Mighty Flux. And my torch is a Smith Silversmith model, which is the acetylene air torch, so it draws in air through these little holes on the side and mixes it with the gas. It's not as hot as an oxyacetylene, but you generally don't need that much heat when you're working with silver, unless you're working with really large quantities or something. Okay, so let's cut a couple of little pieces of solder. Spend a couple of minutes shaping this into the shape of the stone again, using my chain nose pliers. You want to be careful about pushing a stone over something with corners like this. A couple of videos ago I was being careless and I pushed a bezel down over it and it broke the tip off of the stone, so be very gentle about that. I think we nailed the size on this one, so that's awesome. I wanted to thank all the people who've bought my new ebook, the guide to the 2023 video tutorials I did. There's, I don't know, 150 plus pages with information about and links to the various videos I did all throughout the 2023 year. It's a great way to have the information you need in order to do those particular projects, as well as a link right to the video. So if you're interested, I'll put a link up there for you. But it seems very popular right now, and thank you for those who have bought it. I really appreciate the support. Okay, in order to create that step that I was talking about, use a little bit of this 18 gauge. Just like before, I'm not going to end this in the corner, but I am going to kind of try and bend it as sharply as I can with the pliers and try and match the curves that we got going here. I'm going to actually make 2 layers of this 18 gauge wire to create our platform. So I'm going to look at them from the side and make sure they're sitting nice and flat, so you don't end up with kind of a wavy surface for the stone to sit on. And if they're so tight inside of the bezel that you can't get them to lay down flat, maybe you need to probably trim them just a bit more, because again, that'll create the same situation where you have one side sitting higher than the other. And people would say, "Did you see their wonky looking bezel?" They'd probably shame you on all of the online silversmithing forums. Nobody wants that. So the easiest way to solder these in, for me anyway, is to take some of these pieces of solder that I have over here. One thing I do like about these ceramic pads is they're a little bit flatter than my than my all gummed up solderite pad over here. So that's kind of nice. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flux this really well and then set this right on top of these and then heat it like you would any other bezel, and it should just draw it right up in there. So I keep getting asked about my little bottle that I've been dribbling stuff on with. Those are available at hobby stores and things like that, as well as like Amazon. This one was given to me by one of my YouTube followers who's very kind of sent me a couple of things. Some tools and some stones. But it is very useful. I use it more than I use the spray bottle now, probably, so should have figured that out years ago. I'm just going to take the bottom here and file this flat. Okay, so I think that's probably fine. So I'm going to set that, well actually I'm going to use that kind of to plan this around. So I think, let's, here's some of this 18 gauge that I flattened out just a little bit. So I'm going to be creating this out of that. And I think, should we start by, well, here's one of the advantages of having these little books, is I can use this as a guide for how long to cut things. And I'd kind of like to make this one single piece where I file a little notch in it so I can bend it at a sharp angle and then use that as kind of the supporting structure for the whole thing. And then we'll start adding these ones coming out of here like that, and then we'll cut them off to the length we want, and we'll do those little fantail things. What do you think that looks like? It's a mermaid tail? Maybe we should call these mermaid tail earrings. I'm going to file a notch in this with the corner of the file because it's got a nice 90-degree angle there. And I'm going to try and widen that angle just a little bit by tipping this down that way and then the other way. But I don't want to go all the way through. So now, if I take this, I should be able to just kind of bend it right at that spot pretty sharply. And that's about maybe slightly less. About like that, I think. And if I cut it right about there, and use that as the starting place for that one. I'm going to go ahead and cut a second piece the same length while I'm here. So that turned out to be about 42 millimeters, 41, 42 millimeters. Go about right there. Then I'll use that for the second one. But let's go ahead and I'm going to solder this with a little tiny piece of solder right there so that it makes it a permanent bend where it won't, working it back and forth won't break it. So let's do that next. I do something called pick soldering too. If you're interested, I have a video about it. It's a super useful skill when you want to do some precise soldering. They make all these different kinds of picks. This is kind of my favorite right now from Pepe Tools. Let's flux that first. The advantage that pick soldering offers you is you can pick up exactly the size piece of solder you want on the end of the pick like that. Just heat this piece to the temperature where that'll jump on there and just touch it there. And then you get a nice solder joint. It's one of those things that speeds up your process pretty well. Got that. Now, I want to use my flat nose pliers here to kind of give it a gentle curve. Let's see where that bezel falls when we do this. Hopefully I get this straight. We'll see. The real trick to pick soldering is not sticking your pick in there until the metal reaches the temperature that it requires to melt the solder. So I have a tendency to get impatient and jump the gun a little bit. But it works best if you time it just right. But when you're dealing with things that have different masses to them, you have to kind of heat them at different rates. See, now I didn't get the bezel hot enough there, and that solder ran along the whole front of that piece of wire, so, which isn't a huge deal, but if I want it to stick together, I need to get that bezel up to temperature 2. Now, to kind of keep this thing symmetrical, what if we start the center one that splits like this and do that first? And then we'll work our way outwards, and then we'll connect them all. That seems like a reasonable plan. So for the central one, we need a piece that comes out and then splits. So I think probably it'd be easiest to do one that goes that way and then solder another one on that kind of merges with it. Looks pretty good. So let's add the next two in there. They need to be at least that long. I'm going to make a little mark on the bezel about where I want these to attach. It'll help me to get them lined up when I solder these two on. Okay, so about midway down this last spot, I guess. That looks pretty good to me. Let's solder those on. I'm a little shaky today. I'm going to cut it so it's for sure long enough, and then I'll make a second one. Not sure if this is going to work or not, but that's what I'm going to try, and we'll see how it turns out. Alright, let's solder that one and then we'll go from there. I think that's going to be pretty good. So let's solder that on. Is it exact? No. Is it close? Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm just going to file this so it just kind of merges. In theory, anyway. So I will probably do a little bit of filing to neaten that up. But let's make some jump rings here, because I'm going to need to put a jump ring at the top of this. the other thing for each earring we need to make. It's going to be this part up here. So let me find that. I think we can probably do this in 4 pieces. It's going to do what we did before as far as filing. I'm going to cut one of these and then I'll cut the other one exactly the same. And then we'll file these so that I can solder them together. Okay, I'm going to solder those together. So I think I'm going to solder that one on. Come on. It's not one of my soldering days today. Okay, and in order to solder the second one on, cut that off so that doesn't get in the way. think I'm going to file this top point a little bit flatter so I can attach that ring better. Now we just need a jump ring to connect those two together. It's one of those times where I really only need to heat that ring. So, one of the very few times you don't need to heat the entire piece. Make sure everything's still moving there. Okay, so I'm going to pickle that one and make the second one. I'll be right back. So here's our final outcome. I need to use a yellow polishing cloth to get rid of my fingerprints and stuff, but those are my kind of Art Deco earrings. I think they came out nice. I like them. So I'll take some nicer pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well those were the amethyst kind of ornate drop earrings. I'm not sure, like I said, what we're going to call this one yet, but if you enjoyed the content, make sure to hit the like button before you leave, and leave a comment for me. I'd love to hear what you thought. The other thing is, make sure before you go to check out a couple of my other videos. I have well over 300 videos up now, and I produce 3 of them per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday generally. And I think you'll find a lot of valuable content here, whether you're a beginner or someone who's a little more advanced, because there's lots of project ideas, even if you already know how to do this stuff. So check them out. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. And then check the video description too. That's one other thing I'd like you to do. I just finished my first ebook. It's a really convenient way of having all of those videos right at your fingertips. So before you leave, also make sure to hit the video description down below. I just finished publishing my ebook, and it is a guide to the 2023 videos that I made last year. The other thing is, there's some other links there. There's a link to my safety video, a link to my merch store, which you can also buy the ebook there, a link to my merch store where you can get one of those nice design idea books, or the ebook, or some other merch that I have there. A link to my website, a link to my Buy Me a Coffee place if you want to give me a little contribution to help with supplies, and there's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out about that group there. So check it out, and come back and see us again. Take care. Happy silversmithing.